Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. The South Carolina Ports Authority, a major economic driver in South Carolina, supporting 187,000 jobs and nearly $53 billion in annual economic activity. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Good news, bad news. Good news is the economy is so long-lasting and robust that its consistently modest way, it is surprisingly strong and enduring. The bad news is this economy is so long-lasting and robust that we start to forget some of the acute pain of this past Great Recession. And in addition, there is beginning to emerge a youngest demographic that only by reputation has experienced what a shrinking economy can really feel like. Welcome again to the longest running and the most widely watched source of Carolina business policy and public affairs. I'm Chris William. On this edition, we continue to talk about those issues that impact us most here in our communities and this region, certainly. And later on, a very unique business model. Profitability, as we describe it normally, is not their end goal, but rather the measure of effectiveness, engagement, and participation and well-being. Dave Redding, founder of F3 Nation, joins us later.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Jonathan Kappler from the North Carolina Free Enterprise Foundation, David C. Lockwood III of Colliers International, and special guest, David Redding, founder of F3.
Welcome to our program. Jonathan, good to have you here. David, welcome back.
Thank you.
Jonathan, let's talk a little bit about the May primary elections. Anything in there surprise you about where we have been in this political discourse? Did anything spring out of that where you went, wow, I didn't expect that?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few surprises in terms of margins and some outcomes particularly, but given the kind of idiosyncrasies of this election in North Carolina, no statewide marquee contest on the ballot, that kind of thing, it's hard to take real broad macro level takeaways from the election, but nothing is inconsistent with the national data points that we've had, that Democrats are poised probably for a better than even year, and Republicans are in a little bit more of a defensive position.
So you say a little bit more defensive. So Republicans aren't going to be on the run. However, it could be surprisingly strong for or against Republicans?
Right. I think that Democrats are poised to make gains, certainly. It's just kind of how much and whether or not Republicans are used to a new dynamic where they've got their own party in the White House, which is not something that they've really experienced in a while.
Yeah.
And it's different to run those campaigns up and down the ballot when your party's in control.
David, when you hear the politics in North Carolina, it's hard to miss the politics of South Carolina. Always interesting, and especially in light of what has happened at SCANA, the implosion of the nuclear build-out. How much is that going to affect the fall elections in the Palmetto State, you think?
I think there is an impact on the fall elections, but the politicians are being very, very careful with what they're saying and the commitments that they want to make to the voting public. They want the voting public to realize that they know that it's a problem, they want a resolution, but the longer this drags on, the longer the problem drags on, the voting public is just getting tired of it. They want to see a resolution because all they see are their bills that come in every month and they see the headlines. They don't understand why something like this can't be resolved.
Do you think that, as you called the voting public, the electorate, the rank and file, do you think they're going to place blame at the feet of the legislators, at SCANA? I mean, will they punish folks running for office or running for re-election?
I don't think they'll punish folks who are running for re-election, but I think the politicians are walking through a landmine with what they say to their voters and how they want to try to resolve it. They don't want to go too far out on a limb, but they want their voters to know that they're doing what they need to do to address the situation. Bottom line, I think this situation is going to be around for a lot longer past the election.
Will it keep those running for office and in office now in South Carolina, both in Columbia and also in the regional districts, will it keep them on edge?
It will keep them on edge, yes. It will keep them on edge because we keep finding things out about SCANA. We keep finding out things about the debacle that has taken place. And the deeper we go, the uglier it gets.
Jonathan, let me ask you this question. So your former boss and someone you know well, Margaret Spellings, head of the UNC system, co-wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post with Arne Duncan, former head of education in the country. And I want to pull this quote out from their op-ed. It says today, when it comes to education, of course, it says today education is blessed with bipartisan agreement on what works and cursed with bipartisan complacency at every level on taking action. Does that describe what it's like in North Carolina?
I think there's a little bit of a dichotomy between what's happening nationally in higher education policy and K-12 policy and what's happening in North Carolina at the state level, where there is a little bit more focus amongst policymakers on raising teacher pay, getting funding levels back up to where they need to be given the growth in the student population following the recession. And then, of course, in higher education, where North Carolina has a very special relationship between its citizenry and the public institutions here, both at the four-year institution level and at the two-year community college level. So there is a little bit of a kind of a drift that's happening that they were really arguing against at the national level. But again, President Spellings and Arne Duncan, who get along quite well, they're strategic thinkers and they're trying to rally folks around this concept of moving the ball forward on this. Whereas I think that while we have controversies around how to kind of implement some of the policies, there's general consensus about where we need to go and a focus on that and a little bit more action happening in North Carolina.
Is North Carolina's system not lend itself to be progressive with a small p, progressive and flexible enough to raise teacher pay, to have better outcomes with kids at reading at third grade levels, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and I think that North Carolina, there's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of set the standard for the nation. We still have a lot of progress to go, but there's opportunity for us to make real on-the-ground progress, both at the higher education level and at the K-12 level, and to show the nation that there can be progress continue to be made on this, even though there is kind of a treadmill effect where you're just kind of exhausted for talking about the same issues over and over again. David,
let's shift gears a little bit and talk about economic development, but specifically in your world, commercial real estate. When you look at it was a little bit of a surprising to me when I read this, and that is Spartanburg, and not because they're in the upstate or close to Greenville or don't have things going on, but I was surprised by how far ahead Spartanburg is in spec building, in the price growth of residential properties. Spartanburg is exploding. It's booming. I think that's probably an understatement. But does Spartanburg represent some type of proxy for speculative building in commercial real estate?
Well, there's a lot of activity in Spartanburg. Spartanburg has plenty of land, and it's on the I-85 corridor. So we see explosive growth from the commercial sector with speculative distribution centers, warehousing, and I think there's a lot more to come. We've seen this in Charleston. We've seen the growth of the Charleston market, but the inland port, BMW, suppliers, and new companies coming into the upstate is unbelievable. You mentioned economic development, and economic development is one of the most competitive fields there is today. North Carolina has ramped up their game. Georgia has ramped up their game. And really, for any state to be competitive, you have to have the quality product that companies expect these days. I think the days of older buildings, older warehouses, older distribution centers, older office buildings, those are gone. The employment sectors of today, the companies today, they want modern product. And so we're competing with North Carolina and South Carolina. We're competing with Georgia. And if we don't have the product, we can't be competitive. And so this is welcome in the upstate, it's welcome in Charleston, it's welcome in Columbia. I think we're here for a good while as we see development starting to really ramp up.
Well, you said that Spartanburg, you said something here, and I want to go back to your first comment. You said Spartanburg was just off the I-85 corridor. Is South Carolina addressing expansionary strategy around interstates fast enough that won't choke off this growth?
I don't think it will choke off the growth. Companies ultimately decide where they need to be, but 85 is still the major thoroughfare from north to south. That's where most of the companies want to be, unless they're feeding off of the Port of Charleston.
Yeah.
So I think we'll continue to see 85 stretch from Charlotte to Atlanta. It will fill in over in the future, and we'll continue to see this explosive growth.
Yeah, Jonathan, in North Carolina, we recently had on the program DOT Secretary Jim Trogdon. You know, he's a veteran of the system. He knows how things work. He's an engineer, but he's also pretty good at navigating policy and politics, certainly in North Carolina. And he talked about how we need to really think differently about, as we expand transportation, as we get better plans, that we need a completely different funding model, or at least a dramatically different funding model. Can North Carolina, based on the education challenges, can they still find enough money to throw at transportation that's going to be able to keep up with what the growth is?
Yeah, well, necessity is the mother of invention, right here. And so I think there's going to have to be some creativity here. And we've seen conversations around bond referendums. There's been shifts in terms of how we fund some of the transportation infrastructure in North Carolina. And the business community has really been leading in this, because it is that transportation and infrastructure network is critical to the continued growth of North Carolina. And of course, as our growth has happened, we're now the 9th largest state in the country. You also have aging infrastructure. And so it's a little bit less interesting to talk about fixing what we already have, but you're going to have to make continual investments. Sometimes it's not always the most visible investments, but it's something that I think that that will be a continued focus for both parties going forward. I think there's a lot of bipartisan opportunity for policy solutions in this area.
Do you think, quickly, you think there's enough patience with, you think the public is patient enough to know that some of these embedded investments are not going to be obvious, but they'll pay off?
That can be tough. Like sewer infrastructure, you don't see it, but you just need it to really work.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, we are seeing enough new stuff, new infrastructure. I mean, you drive in North Carolina, you're going to see it. And so there is some sense from voters that things are moving forward.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Coming up on a program, he's been here before, he's coming back. Dr. Randy Woodson from North Carolina State will be, he is the chancellor at NC State. He'll be our guest on this program. Also coming up, he is the CEO of Colonial Life out of Columbia, South Carolina. Tim Arnold joins us again, also right here on this program. You know, the F3 website's nomenclature states, if you read it, it says that it is a national network of free peer-led workouts for men. Why is that exceptional? Well, it goes on to describe that, quote, we plant, grow, and serve these groups to invigorate male community leadership. Started 7 years ago now, F3 Nation has grown to more than 25 states, 1,300 scheduled workouts each week. Joining us now is the conceptual author and the F3 co-founder, David Dredd Redding. And Dredd is your handle, is that right, Dave?
That's what they call me. You're right, Chris.
So, you know, the F3 is really an interesting model, and it kind of, how we found out about it on the program is we've known about it for a while, David, but you know, this thing, you talk to males in different communities and all of a sudden they're talking about this thing called F3. Where did the idea of F3 come from, and why do you think it has spread so quickly so far?
Well, it came here in Charlotte is where it originally started 7 years ago, as you said, and there was a few of us working out at Freedom Park, which is a park in Charlotte that is wide open, has a lot of hills, has a lot of apparatus that you can climb on. And there was a group of men working out there already when I joined them. And they had been working out there every Saturday from 7 to 8 for a few years. And they were getting a tremendous amount out of it. And at that point in my life, I was really looking for something, some sense of purpose. You know, I'd been a lawyer for several years and I had young children, but inconsistent fitness. I really didn't have any deep male friendships. And I
because of the state, where you were in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably typical of a lot of men, is that I worked very hard, I worked long hours, I cared about my family, but that's where I spent most of my time. So if you would ask me who are your deep male friends, I might have had to point to men that I'd met in the military. Most of the men I knew in Charlotte or around me were more really acquaintances, and that was my fault as much as anybody else. But so when I went out to this workout, it's 2009, I think. For the first time in a long time, I saw what I had seen in the Army, which was guys just sweating together and kind of breaking down those walls that men will build up if something else doesn't intercede.
Yeah, but entrepreneurs will strive to have the kind of growth that you've had, from one workout 7 years ago to 1,300 scheduled workouts weekly in 25 states. I mean, that's pretty exceptional. What do you think drives that? Where did that come from?
That's easy. Having no plan and no money. You put those two things together and kind of just follow your heart. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. In fact, the first workout where we were, they just had too many men. Had gotten to about 25 or 30 men.
And that's too many.
It's too many. You lose the fellowship. So we said, hey, let's go start another one at a local school about 2 miles away, and we'll see if we can build that up for maybe about 5 guys, maybe take about a year and see if we can get it to about 10 guys. First day, it was 30 men, and it's never stopped growing. So really, it's not us pushing an entrepreneurial plan to expand, it's the leadership such that it is trying to catch up with the expansion that's happening organically and seeing if we can provide just enough structure for it to continue to grow.
Jonathan?
Yeah, the community aspect, right, the bonds, it seems to be such a driver of this in addition to the health aspects of this. And that seems to be a core part of it. Are you surprised how it's resonated with folks?
I'm not really surprised because it did it for me. I mean, I think initially I had to hear other guys were getting the same thing out of it. You hit a good point, Jonathan. It is really that what we call the second fellowship aspect that does it. The faith or the fitness aspect is the magnet. Right. So it's pretty easy to get somebody to join you for a workout, at least try it one time. You can get them out there. But once they get out there and they overcome that first 2 or 3 workouts, it's a little shock to the system how difficult it is. If they get through that and they get through all the lingo we use, they get to that 3rd and 4th workout, that's when the fellowship sets in. Yeah. And we consider that to be the glue. So the fitness is the magnet, brings them in, and then the fellowship's the glue, and that's what keeps them sticky.
Excellent.
David?
Dave, a couple of years ago, Columbia experienced dramatic floods, and Mac Bennett is the former CEO of the United Way of the Midlands. And we asked Mac a question about how relief efforts were mobilized, and he gave a lot of credit to F3. Huh. He said F3 men showed up in droves, and they showed up on the spot. And for such a loose organization, you've got this community spirit that people just showed up from Charlotte, from Raleigh, from other cities, wanting to help out the community. Was that ever in your initial thoughts of how F3 would really impact communities?
Well, that's really the purpose part, what we generally refer to as the 3rd F, faith, which is no specific faith. It's just a belief in something outside yourself, that there's something out there that you need to serve. And however that manifests itself in your community is kind of based on your community. Columbia is slightly different than Charlotte, for instance. But I remember when those floods happened, and we got in what we call clown car, jammed a bunch of guys in a car. We just drove down to Columbia, lawyers and real estate guys, not really guys who were equipped to deal with that kind of thing, got down there without any tools and just walked out. And I remember the Columbia guys just had it very well organized. And we showed up and they told us where to go. We went there, we got tools, and we just pitched in and spent a day helping out there, getting people's belongings out of the houses and tearing down some of the sheetrock that had become inundated with the water and the filth from the rivers. And I remember one point, I think it was a FEMA guy walked up and said, "Who are you guys?" at a clipboard. And I was happy to be the guy standing there. And I said, yeah, we're F3. He goes, okay, and checks it off and walks away. I said, that's pretty surprising. I mean, what is it about F3 that would give this guy from the government the idea that we were a positive force, even knew what we were doing? And as I spent the day there, I realized it's because we were working real hard, and that's what it took.
You almost, and I'm laughing here in the background when you're talking about the guy with the clipboard, because of course I have a clipboard, but also because you have, you don't seem to take yourself seriously, but you take this type of fraternal connection very seriously. Sure. Is that accurate?
I think that's a great way to put it, Chris. I mean, it's a part of what is missing and what draws men and keeps them into F3 is that it's a place for at least 1 hour a day or so. That's the workout. Is you're allowed to say anything you want. And you get a goofy nickname. You're allowed to fall down and trip.
You don't take a nickname. You
get it. You get it. Okay. And that's a little bit of a test because, here you are joining a thing that's a little bit of a tribe. We ask you about 8 questions. Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? How many children do you have? Maybe the last thing we ask you is where you work. And then based on those 8 or 9 questions in very short order, the crowd sources a nickname. We start shouting it out, and then, we kind of agree as a consensus. We just give you the nickname, right? And that becomes a way for you to identify with us and a way for us to identify with you. Mm-hmm. We know a guy's really drunk the Kool-Aid when he starts using it on his professional emails. Maybe we say, man, you might want to back that off if it's a little bit of a scary name. But yeah, that's a big part of it. It gives us that sense of lightness You know that you can come and kind of forget about all the things that are burdening you throughout the day, and in the morning, start your day off with that. Out with a bunch of guys that are doing the same thing. We, at the end, we gather in what we call a ball of man, just a bunch of guys together, and we have that, moment of what we call the circle of trust. And just if you pray or whatever it is that your heart feels that leads you to do. But one of the things I consistently hear wherever I go is, Lord, please make us better men. Please just make better fathers, sons, workers, bosses, whatever those things that men are called on to be, just make us better. And through the system of helping each other, what we call iron sharpening iron, we find that often happens.
John?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the community aspect of this, but also, I mean, there's just the physical fitness component of it and the concept of well-being, right? And I'm curious as to how, as this has grown, both for you personally and for those around you that are involved in it, how that maybe has impacted you professionally, how you make time for it, how it maybe has improved your life elsewhere.
Oh, that's a great question. I personally believe that the more fit you are physically, the better you'll be in all the other aspects of your life, and that's why the fitness is the first F. So it unburdens you from a lot of things we're thinking about all day. I mean, if you get up in the morning, you put on your best suit because you're going to a big trial and it doesn't fit very well, I mean, you're thinking about that. I mean, it's a silly little thing, but if you're uncomfortable physically in your clothes, then it's difficult to be comfortable emotionally in what you're trying to do. So it starts with that. Also, the obvious health effects that are, the first and foremost thing we have. We are constantly reading stories on Twitter and Facebook about guys who will say, I've lost 150 pounds or something like that. I couldn't run 10 feet. Now I just ran my first half marathon. And we call those stories was nows. In other words, there I was, then this happened. Now this is who I am. And quite frankly, that's our greatest marketing tool. We don't really have any marketing budget. We don't do any marketing, but we just take these was nows and we say, here's a guy just like you, just like me. And here's where his life was then. He was unfit, he was lonely, and he felt a lack of purposefulness in his life. Through this, he's able to fill all those three holes. And it sharpened him as a man and made him better at all the things that he's called on to be as a man. And that right there is probably F3 in a nutshell.
I know you're not in F3 yet. I don't think you're going to have any option after this program. Jonathan. Did you lose 100 pounds?
It was 80. Yeah.
And you just ran your half marathon.
Yeah, first half marathon, finished second, beat my time goal. But so, I mean, it definitely, I just stayed up 39 straight hours for the election night, and I don't think I could have done it had I not lost that weight.
Right. So that's a great was now. And I had a lot of was nows that I did when I was trying to do it by myself. But, what I kept having happen in my life is I'd lose weight, and then I'd gain it back. And I'd lose it and gain it back. And we call that in F3 pogo 40, gaining and losing the same 40 pounds over and over again. And, if you look at a pogo stick, it's constantly in motion, up and down and up and down. And it's never really at stasis, right? It's never really at that point. And what we think is that searching for that stasis or that mythical plateau in your life is going to consume you. What you really have to do in life, in all things, in all aspects of life as a man, is to say, I'm either accelerating today, moving a little bit faster than I was yesterday, or I'm decelerating. There's really nothing in between. And the pace of movement isn't that important. What's more important is the fact that you are moving. And that's kind of the way they do it. For me personally, it's kept my weight off. I mean, my bandwidth of weight has reduced to about 10 pounds. My highest to my lowest when it used to be about 40.
So I am an F3er, and I've been in F3 coming up on 5 years.
What's your handle? I'm interested to know what your handle is, Dave.
They call me Queenie. I'm from Charlotte, so I got nicknamed Queenie, and I call it. They call me Queenie. Every workout, they call me Queenie. But what I've noticed over the last almost 5 years, we have people that will show up. We have men that will show up that can be the shyest, introverted men, maybe going through some challenges in their life. But after a few workouts and after a few months that they've taken a leadership role in leading a workout, you start to watch them blossom. You start to see their leadership capabilities coming out. You see the confidence that they have. And we are really watching men come alive in F3. By design, probably. That's what men needed. They needed to become better leaders in their community, and this gives them the opportunity to do that.
And that is the mission, is the purpose of F3, the stated purpose is to invigorate male community leadership. That was the problem that we sought to solve with the group, was the hope that we could do that. And it's a pretty simple formula. It didn't really take any money and doesn't really take any equipment or any professionality. I mean, almost every guy knows how to run a little faster or do a push-up. And so that you hit it right on the head.
And Dred, in Columbia, we have a workout called The Mission, where we have F3 men that will go pull individuals out of a homeless shelter every Saturday morning and work out with them, and we're watching men be rehabilitated.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Will the homeless population, will they join in on this?
Yes, they will. They will. They learn how to work out, and some work out very hard because they want the rehabilitation. But most of all, they want the bonding with other males, and that's what they have.
Well, I think, it's an interesting timing thing, too, because we have social media, right? There's a million ways to connect with people, but those feel so superficial, and this is more genuine and real.
So, David, we're out of time. Guys, thank you. It's been very stimulating. Thank you for being on the program, and congratulations for leading this. It's benefited a whole bunch of communities.
Thank you.
Queenie, good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
We're going to have to call you that.
Of course, and that's good.
And Jonathan, I think we're both going to have to consider committing to this now. Good to see you all. David, again, thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Hope your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, the South Carolina Ports Authority, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.